This is from 12 Rules of Life, rule number 6. This section is called Things Fall Apart. This section of rule number 6 is called Things Fall Apart. Whole peoples have admittedly refused to judge reality, to criticize being, to blame God. It's interesting to consider the Old Testament Hebrews in this regard. Their travels follow a consistent pattern. The stories of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Noah and the Tower of Babel are truly ancient. Their origins vanish in the mysteries of time. It's not until after the flood story in Genesis that something like history, as we understand it, truly starts. It starts with Abraham. Abraham's descendants become the Hebrew people of the Old Testament, also known as the Hebrew Bible. They enter a covenant with Yahweh, with God, and begin their recognizably historical adventures. Under the leadership of a great man, the Hebrews organize themselves into a society and then an empire. As their fortunes rise, success breeds pride and arrogance. Corruption raises its ugly head. The increasingly hubristic state becomes obsessed with power, begins to forget its duty to the widows and orphans, and deviates from its age-old agreement with God. A prophet arises. He brazenly and publicly reviles the authoritarian king and faithless country for their failures before God, an act of blind courage, telling them on this terrible judgment to come. When his wise words are not completely ignored, they are heeded too late. God smites his wayward people, dooming them to abject defeat in battle and generations of subjugation. The Hebrews repent at length, blaming their misfortune on their own failure to adhere to God's words. They insist to themselves that they could have done better. They rebuild their state, and the cycle begins again. This is life. We build structures to live in. We build families and states and countries. We abstract the principles upon which those structures are founded and formulate systems of belief. At first, we inhabit those structures and beliefs like Adam and Eve in paradise. But success makes us complacent. We forget to pay attention. We take what we have for granted. We turn a blind eye. We fail to notice that things are changing or that corruption is taking root, and everything falls apart. Is that the fault of reality or of God? Or do things fall apart because we have not paid sufficient attention? When the hurricane hit New Orleans and the town sank under the waves, was that a natural disaster? The Dutch prepared their dikes for the worst storm in 10,000 years. Had New Orleans followed that example, no tragedy would have occurred. It's not that no one knew. The Flood Control Act of 1965 mandated improvements to the levee system that held back the lake. The system was to be completed by 1978. 40 years later, only 60% of the work had been done. Willful blindness, and corruption took the city down. A hurricane is an act of God, but failure to prepare when the necessity for preparation is well known, that's sin. That's failure to hit the mark, and the wages of sin is death. Romans chapter 6, verse 23. The ancient Jews always blamed themselves when things fell apart. They acted as if God's goodness, the goodness of reality, was axiomatic and took responsibility for their own failure. That's insanely responsible, but the alternative is to judge reality as insufficient, to criticize being itself, and to sink into resentment and the desire for revenge. That's insanely responsible, but the alternative is to judge reality as insufficient, to criticize being itself, and to sink into resentment and the desire for revenge. That's what we don't want to do. If you are suffering, well, that's the norm. People are limited and life is tragic. If your suffering is unbearable, however, and if you're starting to become corrupted, here's something to think about. Clean up your life. Consider your circumstances. Start small. Have you taken full advantage of the opportunities offered to you? Are you working hard on your career or even your job? Are you letting bitterness and are you letting bitterness and resentment hold you back and drag you down? Have you made peace with your brother? Are you treating your spouse and your children with dignity and respect? Do you have habits that are destroying your health and well-being? Are you truly shouldering your responsibilities? Have you said that what you need to say to your friends and your family members? Are these things that what you could do, that you know you could do, that would make things around you better? Have you cleaned up your life? If the answer is no, here's something to try. Start to stop doing what you know is wrong. Start stopping today. I guess smoking would be a great example. Stop doing what you know is wrong. Don't waste time questioning how you know that what you're doing is wrong if you're certain that it is. Inopportune questions can confuse without enlightening as well as deflecting you from action. You can know that something is wrong or right without knowing why. Your entire being can tell you something that you neither explain nor articulate. Every person is too complex to know themselves completely, and we all contain wisdom that we cannot comprehend. It's another reason to listen to your gut. Don't ask why, just listen to your gut. So, simply stop when you apprehend, however dimly, that you should stop. Stop acting in that particular despicable manner. Stop saying those things that make you weak and ashamed. Say only those things that make you strong. Do only those things that you could speak of with honor. You can use your own standards of judgment. You can rely on yourself for guidance. You don't have to adhere to some external arbitrary code of behavior. Although you should not overlook the guidelines of your culture, life is short, and you do not have the time to figure everything out on your own. The wisdom of the past was hard-earned, and your dead ancestors may have something useful to tell you. Don't blame capitalism, the radical left, or the iniquity of your enemies. Don't reorganize the state until you have ordered your own experience. Have some humility. If you cannot bring peace to your household, how dare you try to rule a city? Let your own soul guide you. Watch what happens over the days and weeks. When you are at work, you will begin to say what you really think. You will start to tell your wife or your husband or your children or your parents what you really want and need. When you know that you have left something undone, you will act to correct the omission. Your head will start to clear up as you start filling it with lies. Your head will start to clear up as you stop filling it with lies. Your experience will improve as you stop distorting it with inauthentic actions. You will then begin to discover new, more subtle things that you are doing wrong. Stop doing those too. After some months and years of diligent effort, your life will become simpler and less complicated. Your judgment will improve. You will untangle your past. You will become stronger and less bitter. You will move more confidently into the future. You will stop making your life unnecessarily difficult. You will then be left with the inevitable bare tragedies of life, but they will no longer be compounded with the bitterness and deceit. Perhaps you will discover that your now less corrupted soul, much stronger than it might otherwise have been, is now able to bear those remaining necessary, minimal, inescapable tragedies. Perhaps you will even learn to encounter them so that they stay tragic, merely tragic, instead of degenerating into outright hellishness. Maybe your anxiety and hopelessness and resentment and anger, however murderous initially, will recede. Perhaps your corrupted soul will then see its existence as a genuine good, as something to celebrate even in the face of your own vulnerability. Perhaps you will become an even more powerful force for peace and whatever is good. Perhaps you will then see that if all people did this in their own lives, the world might stop being an evil place. After that, with continued effort, perhaps it could even stop being a tragic place. Who knows what existence might be like if we all decide to strive for the best? Who knows what eternal heavens might be established by our spirits, purified by truth, aiming skyward, right here on the fallen earth? Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. That was rule number 6. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.